Retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens is just one of the many who believe Kavanaugh is unfit to serve on the nation's highest court. One concern is that naming such a partisan figure to the court could end any remaining notion that the Supreme Court is apolitical. Paul Butler and Elie Mystal are still with me. 107 judicial vacancies, Elie, when President Obama left office, because Mitch McConnell said you will seat no one. You will seat no Supreme Court justice. You will seat no one, and only a Republican will be allowed to do it. He got away with it. Yeah. So now we're at a point where Mitch McConnell has said, I will wield such total control that even if this man is credibly accused of sexual assault, so what? Yeah. Too bad.
The Democrats lost this battle in 2014 when we did not answer the bell in the midterm election to back up Obama. We lost the battle again in 2016 when we allowed Donald Trump to be elected. So now, having lost the war, it's a time to ask Democrats, what are they willing to do now? We've tried it the Chris Coons way. I say we try it the Chicago way, all right? I say we burn it down. So when it comes to 2020, at some point, some Democrat is going to show up on my television and ask me for my vote. And they will not get it unless that Democrat is able to tell me what their plan for court packing is. I've got my own plan, but I want to hear how they're going to pack the court, how they're going to restore legitimacy to the Supreme Court. Because I refuse to look at survivors and victims of sexual assault and tell them that they just have to take it. Yeah. And they just have to sit there and have 2 of the 5 Republican Supreme Court justices be credibly accused of sexual harassment.
And you know, so can we play Mitch McConnell? Because I think we should never forget this. That Mitch McConnell essentially said, we own the court. We as Republicans, it's ours. And we have it, and we will do with it what we will. And if you're a Democrat, too bad. Even if you are president of the United States, we own the court. And here he is.
One of my proudest moments is when I looked at Barack Obama in the eye and I said, Mr. President, you will not fill this Supreme Court vacancy.
I mean, that disrespect for the President of the United States was the origin story of what Mitch McConnell was able to do this week.
Yeah, and, you know, as I'm the Albert Britt Professor in Law at Georgetown, Brett Kavanaugh is going to be the Donald Trump Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. These 5 far right-wing conservatives on the court will do the president's bidding. So in some ways, they may preserve, you know, the appearance, or they may not technically overrule Roe versus Wade, but they'll put so many restrictions on providers that essentially women will not be able to get the health care that they want. They may not overrule the right of people to get married to whoever they love, but they'll say, if you don't want to serve those people, you don't have to.
Yeah, and can we just go through, just real quick, I'm going to let you back in, Elie. These are the moments that for the Democrats say the Supreme Court is essentially an anathema and an enemy to people who are in the margins of society. Citizens United, where they said, spend what you want if you're a corporation, if you're rich. Bush v. Gore, where the Supreme Court majority, the Republicans picked a president. Clarence Thomas's confirmation, the first of 2 out of 5. Killing a key part of the Voting Rights Act, gutting voting rights. And that's the supposed swing vote John Roberts doing, and the Kavanaugh confirmation. For Republicans, they have a flip side argument, which is that rejecting Robert Bork, who was openly for getting rid of Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade itself, and the Obergefell decision, which allowed same-sex marriage, that to them, those are existential threats to Christians' religious liberty. So the 2 sides both believe that the court is an existential threat. How can it be legitimate?
Well, the 2 sides both believe that the court is an existential threat, but only one side acts like it. So story time, right? On my way to work, there is a Planned Parenthood. And every day when I pass that Planned Parenthood, there is a lone woman out there protesting with a big pro-life sign. You know, I don't agree with her. She's there every day. Sometimes I roll down my window and yell at her. She's there every day. Yep. The Republicans have done this not because they're smarter or better, or not because there are more of them, but because they are more committed on this issue. I have heard people on this network since Susan Collins did her Laertes thing, saying, oh, well, we can't impeach Kavanaugh because, I mean, we're not going to get sick. I don't care. Yeah. I want him impeached. If Democrats take back the House, I want impeachment trials by Martin Luther King Day. And to quote one of my favorite movies, Remember the Titans, I want the Democrats to blitz every down.
Yeah.
All right? Because that's what the Republicans do. The Republicans do not fold. They fight. They fight when they win. They fight when they're going to lose. They fight when the odds are in their favor or not. They fight, and it's time for the Democrats to finally show that same fight about these issues, because if they don't, it's a generation. It's a generational change in terms of the rights of women, the rights of gays, and the rights of minorities.
Can we play, because I think that, Paul, it's on the issues of, LGBT people and women and minorities that we tend to focus on the Supreme Court. But Sheldon Whitehouse, who I think has actually been brilliant over these confirmation hearings, because he's reminded people that the real origin of what the Supreme Court has become has to do with money. It has to do with more than just rights. It has to do with dollars and cents. Here's Sheldon Whitehouse.
We go back to a Supreme Court far too often dancing to the tune of a handful of big Republican special interests. Big Republican special interests funding the Federalist Society that is now picking Supreme Court nominees. Big Republican special interests using the unlimited dark money power the Supreme Court gave them to mount TV ad campaigns for Supreme Court nominees. People are catching on. The record of this is undeniable. And as I said, it will be a disaster for the court.
The super rich have captured the court.
Yeah, so we can think of Citizens United, where the court said that corporations have some of the same kinds of rights as human beings. In part, they're protecting their own interests. Brett Kavanaugh, if he's confirmed, will be the poorest person on the Supreme Court. He's the only one who's not a millionaire. Many of them are extremely wealthy. And again, when we look at how they vote, especially the 5 Republicans, what they do is preserve the interests of the rich, the white, and the wealthy. The only kind of discrimination this new court will care about is alleged discrimination against straight white men.
And how are we a democracy if this is a minority? I think 70 senators represent 30% of the country, and they have the power to exert minority rule. The majority of people who live in cities, who are in urban centers, who want gun reform, who want LGBT equality, who want all these things, are being told by a minority, you may not have it ever. We're going to keep the court forever, and you'll never be able to have what the majority wants. How are we a democracy in that instance?
The only cure is more democracy, right? The only cure is more sunlight. And this is where I think the media has to take some of the responsibility too here, right? If we understand that the Supreme Court is a political organization, which it is, then it needs to be covered like a political organization, right? Most people watching the show who are relatively very informed people would not recognize John Roberts if he was having a burrito right next to them, right?
That's true.
And that's partially the media's fault, right? Like, we need to put you can't, bother a Supreme Court. You can't hold a Supreme Court justice accountable the way you can your congressman or your senator, right? But there's no good reason anymore for the media not to be covering the Supreme Court, for everybody not to know who these people are, for all of the kind of lobbying and pressure points that was put on Jeff Flake to be put on John Roberts the next time he's about to do something. Like, we need better coverage of this, and that's not small d democracy, but that is part of the way to bring transparency to what these robed men and women are doing in secret.
Yeah, I think people are woke up this morning nervous and afraid. I've gotten a lot of texts from people who are scared, who really feel like their future is now in jeopardy because the one sort of backstop has been the court that would protect you, do Brown v. Board, et cetera. And I think a lot of people are worried that's not going to be the case anymore. Elie Mystal, Paul Butler, thank you both. Really appreciate you both being here. And up next, the fight over Kavanaugh may have ended in the Senate, but the protests have not ended, and they are still in the streets. We're going to talk about that next.